The marriage contract felt heavier than the ceremonial blade at Marcus Chen's side as he stood in the gleaming hall of the Zephyrian embassy on New Geneva Station. Around him, delegates from 12 different species whispered in languages that sounded like wind chimes, grinding metal, and distant thunder. The air recyclers couldn't quite mask the smell of sulfur from the Crothery delegation or the sweet ozone scent that followed the luminari wherever they went. Ambassador Lyralii of the Zephyrian Empire stood nearly 8 feet tall, her crystalline skin catching the artificial sunlight that streamed through the massive viewport. Her 4 arms moved with the fluid grace of someone born in low gravity, and, when she spoke, her voice resonated like a crystal bell. The terms are simple, human. Your species provides one representative for marriage bonding with our chosen diplomat. In return, we grant Earth membership in the Galactic Trade Consortium. Marcus adjusted his plain black suit and try not to think about how his monthly salary as a librarian could probably buy a cup of coffee on this station. The Zephyrians had specifically requested someone unremarkable for their delegate, someone who wouldn't draw attention or complicate their political games. The Earth Council had been more than happy to volunteer him. The human representative has been selected, Admiral Harrison announced, gesturing toward Marcus. Marcus Chun, civilian specialist in xenolinguistics and cultural archives. Lyralii's large, multifaceted eyes examined Marcus with the kind of attention usually reserved for interesting insects. Acceptable. The bonding ceremony will commence immediately. What followed was the most bureaucratic wedding in human history. No rings, no vows, just a series of energy signatures recorded in triplicate and filed with the appropriate authorities. Marcus found himself legally married to someone whose name he couldn't pronounce and whose species he'd only read about in academic papers. Zara Teal, just call me Zara, she'd said in perfect English, stood barely 5 feet tall, unusual for a Zephyrian. Where Lyralii's skin caught light like a prism, Zara's seemed to absorb it, creating subtle patterns that shifted when she moved. She wore simple robes in deep blue, and the only jewelry she carried was a thin circlet that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as her skin. I apologize for the circumstances, she said as they were escorted to what would apparently be their shared quarters on the station. Her voice was softer than Lyralii's, more like wind through leaves than ringing crystal. This arrangement serves my people's political needs, but I understand it must be difficult for you. Marcus nodded, still processing everything. I have to ask, why me? The council said your people specifically wanted someone ordinary. Zara was quiet for a long moment as they walked through corridors lined with art from a dozen worlds. Ordinary is safe, she finally said. My presence here is complicated enough without adding celebrity or political ambition to the mix. Their quarters were luxurious by station standards. 2 rooms connected by a common area, with a viewport that showed the slowly rotating bulk of New Geneva's main habitat ring. Zara immediately moved to the window and stood there for several minutes, her skin patterns shifting more rapidly. Are you all right? Marcus asked. I have not seen open space in some time, she said without turning around. My people, we're not always free to travel as we choose. There was something in her tone that made Marcus look at her more carefully. The way she held herself, the careful distance she maintained from the embassy staff, the fact that she'd been so readily volunteered for what amounted to a political marriage. You're not here by choice, are you? Zara finally turned from the window. Choice is a luxury my family cannot afford to give me right now. She managed a small smile. But I'm grateful it was you. The human they described to us sounded kind. Over the next few days, as they waited for the trade negotiations to conclude, Marcus learned more about his unexpected wife. Zara was a scholar like himself, though her field was something the translators called harmonic engineering. She spoke 17 languages fluently and could read ancient texts and scripts that predated most current civilizations. She was also, he gradually realized, terrified of something. It wasn't obvious at first. She was polite, even friendly, and seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture. But Marcus had spent years in archives and libraries, places where you learn to read people by the way they handled books and navigated silence. Zara moved like someone expecting trouble, and she never fully relaxed, even in their shared quarters. On the third night, Marcus found her in the common area at 3 in the morning, sitting cross-legged on the floor with what looked like a piece of crystalline technology spread out in components around her. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling into a chair nearby. "I do not require as much rest as humans," she said, but her hands stilled on the device she was working on. "I hope I did not wake you." "No, I'm a natural night owl." Marcus looked at the components scattered around her. They seemed to pulse with their own inner light, responding to her touch in ways that defied his understanding of physics. "What are you working on?" Zara hesitated, then picked up what looked like a crystalline rod about the length of a sword hilt. "A family heirloom. It was damaged, and I'm trying to repair it." Marcus had handled enough ancient artifacts to recognize when someone was being evasive. But he also recognized the careful way she touched the device, the reverent attention she paid to each component. Whatever it was, it mattered to her deeply. "My grandmother always said that broken things could be stronger than new ones, if they were mended with care," he offered. Zara looked up at him, and for the first time since they'd met, her smile seemed genuine. "Your grandmother sounded wise. She taught me that sometimes the most important things are the ones that seem ordinary on the surface." Something shifted in Zara's expression, and the patterns in her skin began moving more rapidly. "Marcus, there are things about my presence here that you do not understand. Things that could become dangerous for you." "What kind of dangerous?" "The kind where asking too many questions can get people killed." She began carefully packing away the components of her device. "My marriage to you is not just about trade agreements. There are those among my people who would prefer I not return home at all." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "Are you telling me this marriage is actually meant to protect you?" "Among other things." Zara stood, the crystalline rod disappearing into her robes. "I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe from the consequences of my family's situation. But I also need you to trust me, even when I cannot explain everything." Marcus thought about his quiet life in the archives, his small apartment overlooking the artificial lake in New Geneva's residential sector, the comfortable predictability of cataloging ancient texts, and helping researchers find obscure references. All of that was gone now, replaced by something far more complex and potentially dangerous. "Zara," he said carefully, "that thing you're working on, it's not really broken, is it?" Her skin patterns stilled completely, and for a moment she looked like a statue carved from living crystal. "No," she said quietly. "It is not broken. It is sleeping." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the lights in their quarters flickered and died. Emergency illumination kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound. Zara's hand went immediately to her robes where the crystalline rod was hidden, and Marcus saw her skin begin to glow with its own inner light. "It seems," she said, her voice taking on a new quality that made the air itself seem to vibrate, "that we have run out of time for explanations." The viewport that showed the peaceful rotation of New Geneva's habitat ring now revealed something else entirely. The sleek, predatory shapes of warships dropping out of hyperspace, their hulls marked with symbols Marcus had never seen before. "Who are they?" he asked. "Family," Zara replied, and the way she said it made the word sound like a curse. The warships materialized from hyperspace with the kind of precision that spoke of military discipline and overwhelming technological superiority. Marcus counted at least 30 vessels, their crystalline hulls refracting the light of New Geneva's star into deadly rainbows. Each ship was easily 3 times the size of the station's defensive platforms, and their weapons arrays were already powering up with an ominous blue glow. "Attention, New Geneva Station," came a voice over the communication system, speaking in that same crystal bell tone as Lyralii, but with an edge sharp enough to cut steel. You are harboring a fugitive from Zephyrian justice. Surrender Zaratiel immediately, and no harm will come to your facility." Marcus looked at his wife, who stood perfectly still in the center of their quarters, her skin now glowing bright enough to cast shadows on the walls. The crystalline rod had appeared in her hand, though he hadn't seen her draw it from her robes. It was no longer the simple artifact he'd seen her working on. Now it hummed with energy that made his teeth ache, and the air around it seemed to bend and shimmer. "Fugitive?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The situation is somewhat more complex than that," Zara replied, her voice carrying the same strange harmonics he'd heard the night before. "My father was the keeper of the eternal resonance. When he died, the responsibility should have passed to my elder brother. Instead, he chose to claim it passed to me." The station shuddered as the first warning shots struck the outer shields. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the defensive platforms moving into formation, but they looked like toys compared to the Zephyrian fleet. "What's the eternal resonance?" Marcus asked, though part of him was beginning to suspect the answer had something to do with the weapon in his wife's hand. "Every Zephyrian world resonates with a specific harmonic frequency," Zara explained as she moved toward the viewport. "Control those frequencies, and you control our civilization. The eternal resonance is both the source of that control and the key to breaking it." Another impact, stronger this time. The lights flickered again, and Marcus could hear the station's hull groaning under the assault. Emergency announcements were blaring in a dozen languages, telling civilians to report to secure areas immediately. "So, your brother wants you dead because you inherited something he thinks should be his?" "He wants me dead because I chose to take it away from our world entirely rather than let him use it to enslave our people." Zara's grip tightened on the crystalline weapon. "The marriage to you was meant to place me under Earth's protection, but it seems that protection may not be enough." Through the viewport, Marcus could see smaller ships launching from the Zephyrian fleet, boarding craft, heading straight for the station. The defensive platforms were firing now, their weapons creating brilliant flashes against the crystalline hulls of the attackers, but their shots seemed to be absorbed rather than causing damage. "There has to be something we can do," Marcus said. "Some way to negotiate, or there is—" Zara interrupted, turning to face him. Her multifaceted eyes were now glowing with the same inner light as her skin, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "But it will require you to trust me completely, and it will change everything about your quiet life." Marcus thought about his library, his books, his peaceful routine of cataloging and research. Then he thought about the 30 warships outside and the woman standing before him, who had somehow become more important to him in 3 days than he'd expected anyone to be in a lifetime. "What do you need me to do?" Zara smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely relieved. "Hold this," she said, offering him the crystalline rod. Marcus reached out hesitantly. The moment his fingers touched the weapon, the world exploded into sensation. He could feel the resonant frequency of every piece of crystalline technology on the station, from the artificial gravity generators to the communication arrays. He could sense the harmonic signatures of the Zephyrian ships outside, their weapons, their shields, even the life patterns of the crews aboard them. But more than that, he could feel something vast and ancient stirring to wakefulness, as if the weapon in his hands was not just a tool, but a living thing that had been waiting for someone to call it back to consciousness. "What is this?" he gasped, his vision filled with patterns of light and sound that seemed to map the structure of space itself. "The world, Zinger," Zara replied, her voice now coming from very far away despite the fact that she was standing right beside him. "The first weapon, the one that taught my ancestors how to shape reality with harmonic resonance. It has been sleeping for 3,000 years, waiting for someone worthy to wake it." The station shuddered again, and this time Marcus could feel the impact not just through the deck plates, but through the harmonic frequencies that held the structure together. The Zephyrian boarding craft were almost at the docking bays. "Why me?" Marcus asked, though he was already beginning to understand. I'm nobody special. I'm just a librarian. You're someone who understands that the most powerful things are often the quietest, Zara said. Someone who knows that true strength comes not from forcing your will on others, but from understanding the deeper patterns that connect everything together. The Worldzinger chose you the moment you touched it, just as I hoped it would. Through the weapon's enhanced perception, Marcus could sense the approaching boarding parties, their intent to capture Zura and drag her back to face whatever justice her brother had planned. He could feel the terror of the station's civilian population as they huddled in emergency shelters. He could sense the growing desperation of the defense forces as they realized their weapons were useless against Zephyrian technology. And he could feel something else, a vast network of harmonic resonances that connected every piece of crystalline technology in this part of space, from the tiniest communication device to the massive engines of the warships themselves. All of it was connected, all of it was vulnerable, and all of it was suddenly within his reach. I need to stop this without killing anyone, Marcus said, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. That, Zara replied, is exactly why the Worldzinger chose you. Marcus closed his eyes and reached out through the weapon's consciousness, feeling for the right frequency, the right harmonic pattern. The Zephyrian ships were protected by shields that absorbed energy weapons, but those same shields were made of crystalline matrices that resonated at specific frequencies. If he could find the right note, the right pattern of sound and vibration, he began to hum a simple melody his grandmother had taught him years ago, something about morning light and growing flowers. The Worldzinger picked up the tune and amplified it, spreading it through subspace at frequencies that bypassed normal communication channels and went straight to the crystalline cores of every ship in the attacking fleet. The effect was immediate and dramatic. One by one, the Zephyrian warships simply stopped. Their weapons powered down, their shields collapsed, and their engines went silent. Not destroyed, not damaged, just peacefully deactivated as if they had all decided to take a nap at the same time. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the boarding craft drifting helplessly, their crews probably staring at control panels that no longer responded to their commands. The massive warships hung in space like sleeping giants, beautiful and harmless. Impossible, came a voice over the communication system, the same voice that had demanded Zara's surrender, but now sounding stunned rather than threatening. The Worldzinger was lost millennia ago. How does a human command the voice of our ancestors? Zara took the crystalline rod back from Marcus, and the overwhelming sensory input faded to manageable levels, though he could still feel a faint echo of the vast harmonic network he'd touched. "Hello, HFY," she said into the comm unit, her voice carrying new authority. "As you can see, the situation has changed somewhat." "Sister," came the reply, and Marcus could hear both anger and fear in the harmonics. "You would give our most sacred weapon to an alien?" "I would trust it to someone worthy of its power," Zara corrected. "Someone who used it not to destroy his enemies, but to protect innocence. The Worldzinger has made its choice, brother. The question now is whether you will accept that choice or continue this pointless pursuit." There was a long silence from the Zephyrian fleet. Marcus could sense through his lingering connection to the weapon that the ship's crews were working frantically to restore power to their systems. But the harmonic lock he'd placed on their crystalline cores would hold for hours at least. Finally, HFY's voice returned, sounding defeated. "The Council will hear of this. They will not accept a human as bearer of the Worldzinger." "Then, perhaps it is time for the Council to learn that power does not come from bloodlines or political position," Zara replied. "Perhaps it is time for them to remember that our ancestors built the Worldzinger not as a weapon of conquest, but as a tool for bringing peace and harmony to a chaotic universe." The communication channel went silent. One by one, the Zephyrian ships began to power up their engines, not their weapons, just their drives. Within an hour, they had all jumped back into hyperspace, leaving New Geneva Station in peace. Marcus sank into a chair, feeling suddenly exhausted. "So what happens now?" Zara sat down beside him, the Worldsing once again appearing as nothing more than a simple crystalline rod. Now, she said, we go home to Earth, and I teach you how to properly use the most powerful weapon in known space. And then, when you're ready, we return to my people and show them what it truly means to sing the songs that shape worlds. Marcus nodded, still trying to process everything that had just happened. His quiet life as a librarian was definitely over, but somehow, looking at the woman beside him and feeling the echo of ancient power still humming in his bones, he thought he might be able to manage the alternative 6 months after the incident at New Geneva Station. Marcus stood in the middle of what had once been the quiet reading garden behind the Earth Council archives. The space had been transformed into something that looked like a fusion of a meditation retreat and a high-tech laboratory, with crystalline resonance chambers growing from the earth like geometric flowers and harmonic analysis equipment humming softly among the original rose bushes. Zara moved through the space with fluid grace, adjusting the position of resonance crystals and fine-tuning the harmonic frequencies that flowed through the air like invisible music. She'd changed since their arrival on Earth, growing more confident and open as she settled into her role as Marcus's teacher and humanity's unofficial ambassador to the greater galactic community. The key, she was saying, as Marcus attempted to attune himself to the Worldzinger's harmonic patterns, is not to force the resonance, but to find it. Every object, every person, every world has its own natural frequency. Your role is to listen, not to command. Marcus held the crystalline weapon loosely in his hands, trying to feel the subtle vibrations that Zara assured him were there. After months of practice, he could reliably detect the harmonic signatures of simple crystalline devices, but the more complex patterns still eluded him. I can sense something, he said, concentrating on a small communication crystal Zara had placed on a nearby table. It feels like music that's almost in tune, but not quite. Exactly. Zara's skin patterns brightened with pleasure. Now, instead of trying to change the crystal's frequency, try to understand why it resonates the way it does. What is it trying to communicate? Marcus closed his eyes and let the Worldzinger's perception expand his awareness. The communication crystal's harmonic signature gradually resolved into something like meaning. A stored message, he realized, recorded in the crystalline matrix itself. There's a message in it, he said. Something about a meeting? Representatives from multiple species? Very good. Zara retrieved the crystal and tucked it back into her robes. That message arrived this morning through diplomatic channels. The Galactic Council has officially requested a meeting with the bearer of the Worldzinger. Marcus opened his eyes, the familiar sensation of returning to normal human perception always slightly disorienting. They want to meet with me? Word has spread since New Geneva, Zara explained, settling gracefully onto one of the stone benches that surrounded the practice area. 30 Zephyrian warships disabled without a single casualty by a human who had never held the Worldzinger before that day. The other species are curious about what this might mean for the balance of power in the galaxy. Marcus set the Worldzinger carefully on its stand, a piece of crystalline technology that Zara had grown specially to hold the ancient weapon. And what does it mean? That depends entirely on you, Zara replied. The Worldzinger has chosen a human as its bearer, something that has never happened before. Some species see this as a sign that humanity is ready to take a larger role in galactic affairs. Others see it as a threat to their own positions of power. Before Marcus could respond, his communicator chimed with an incoming call. The display showed the seal of the Earth Council, which generally meant either very good news or very bad news. Given recent events, Marcus was learning to expect the latter. Mr. Chun, came the voice of Admiral Harrison, the same official who had volunteered Marcus for his marriage to Zara 6 months earlier. We need you and your wife at the council chambers immediately. We have a situation. An hour later, Marcus and Zara stood in the main briefing room of the Earth Council building, facing a collection of officials who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Admiral Harrison gestured to the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. 3 days ago, the mining colony on Kepler 442b went silent. Harrison began without preamble. Initial reconnaissance suggested equipment failure, but yesterday we received this. The hologram shifted to show a recording from what was obviously a damaged communication array. The image was grainy and filled with static, but Marcus could clearly see the distinctive shapes of buildings that had been partially melted, as if something had applied intense heat in precise, controlled patterns. Harmonic resonance weapons, Zara said quietly, her skin patterns shifting to darker hues. But not Zephyrian design. The frequency signatures are all wrong. The colony had a population of 12,000, Harrison continued. Mining families, research teams, support staff. We've had no contact with any of them since the attack began. Marcus studied the recording, trying to understand what he was seeing. You said attack. Are we sure this wasn't some kind of accident? The hologram shifted again, this time showing a close-up of one of the damaged buildings. Carved into the crystalline structure of what had been the colony's communication center was a symbol that made Zara gasp. A complex geometric pattern that seemed to hurt to look at directly. The mark of the Void Singers, she whispered, her skin now completely dark except for rapid flickering patterns that Marcus had learned indicated extreme distress. Marcus, this is very bad. Very, very bad. Who are the Void Singers? Admiral Harrison asked. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the symbol in the hologram. When she finally spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made everyone in the room unconsciously step back. They're what my people call the silence between notes, she said. An ancient sect that believes harmonic resonance is a corruption of the natural order. They seek to eliminate all crystalline technology from the galaxy, returning the universe to what they see as its original state of chaos. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's climate control. And they've targeted the mining colony because Kepler 442b has the largest known deposits of resonance crystals outside the core Zephyrian worlds, Harrison replied grimly. If they can destroy the mining operation, they can cut off the supply of crystal technology to most of the outer systems. But that would affect more than just crystal tech, Marcus realized. Half the medical equipment in human space relies on resonance enhancement. Communication networks, gravity generators, life support systems. Exactly, Zara confirmed. The Void Singers do not distinguish between military and civilian applications. To them, all harmonic technology is equally corrupt. They would rather see billions die than allow the continued use of crystalline resonance. Admiral Harrison leaned forward across the conference table. Mr. Chun, the Council is formally requesting your assistance in dealing with this situation. You and the Worldsinger are possibly the only things in this part of space that could stand against Void Singer technology. Marcus looked at the image of the destroyed colony, thinking about the 12,000 people who had simply vanished. What exactly are you asking me to do? We're asking you to help us save them, Harrison replied. Our intelligence suggests that the Void Singers don't simply destroy their targets. They convert them, turning entire populations into additional Void Singers. If we can reach Kepler 442b quickly enough, there might still be time to reverse the process. And if we can't, Harrison's expression was grim. Then humanity's first real encounter with galactic warfare is going to be a genocide. Marcus turned to Zura, who was still studying the symbol with obvious distress. What do you think? Can the Worldsinger help? The Worldsinger was created specifically to counter the chaos that the Void Singers represent, she said slowly. In theory, yes, it could reverse their work. But, Marcus, the Void Singers have had 3,000 years to develop their techniques. What they do to their victims, it changes them on a fundamental level, rewriting the harmonic patterns that define their consciousness. You're saying we might be too late to save them? I'm saying that even if we succeed in defeating the Void Singers, the people we rescue may not be entirely human anymore. Marcus thought about this for a moment, then walked over to the hologram and studied the image of the destroyed colony. Somewhere in those melted buildings were 12,000 people who had been living quiet lives, working, raising families, contributing to the slow expansion of human civilization into the galaxy. People who deserved better than to become casualties in an ancient war they'd never heard of. "How long to reach Kepler?" 442b, he asked. 18 hours at maximum jump speed, Admiral Harrison replied. Marcus nodded, making his decision. "Then, we'd better get started. Because if there's even a chance that those people are still alive, still human, then we have to try." Zara placed a gentle hand on his arm, her skin patterns finally stabilizing into something resembling calm. "The Worldzinger chose well," she said softly. "But, Marcus, you need to understand, this will not be like New Geneva Station. The Void Singers will not simply retreat when they realize what we carry. They will fight, and they will try to corrupt the Worldzinger itself, turn it into an instrument of chaos. Then, I guess it's a good thing I spent all those years in quiet libraries," Marcus replied. "I've gotten pretty good at finding signal in the noise." Admiral Harrison activated his communicator. "Prepare the fastest ship we have for immediate departure. And give me a direct line to the Galactic Council. If we're going to war with the Void Singers, we're going to need all the help we can get." As the briefing room erupted into activity around them, Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The quiet life he'd once known was becoming more of a distant memory with each passing day. But somehow, looking at the symbol of the Void Singers and thinking about the people they were racing to save, he found that he didn't mind. Some things were worth singing for. Some songs were worth the risk of losing your voice. The journey to Kepler 442b aboard the Earth Council ship Harmony took 16 hours through 7 hyperspace jumps, each transition bringing them closer to what sensors indicated was a completely dead system. Marcus spent most of the trip in the ship's small meditation chamber with Zara, practicing advanced harmonics techniques while trying to understand exactly what they would be facing. "The Void Singers do not simply destroy," Zara explained as she guided him through exercises designed to strengthen his connection to the Worldzinger. "They corrupt. They take the natural harmonic resonances that exist in all living things and twist them into discordance." Marcus held the ancient weapon across his palms, feeling the subtle vibrations that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat over the past months. Through its enhanced perception, he could sense the crew of the Harmony, their individual life signatures creating a complex symphony of biological rhythms and emotional resonances. What does that mean for the colonists? If the conversion process is complete, they will no longer be recognizably human, Zara replied, her skin patterns shifting to darker hues as she spoke. The Void Singers will have rewritten their neural pathways, their genetic structure, even their basic consciousness patterns. They will become extensions of the Void Singer Collective, capable of channeling the same destructive harmonics. Captain Sarah Chun, no relation to Marcus, despite the shared surname, entered the meditation chamber as they were speaking. She was a career military officer who'd volunteered for this mission despite having no real understanding of what they were likely to encounter. "We're approaching the edge of the system," she reported. "Long-range sensors are showing some unusual readings. The planetary resonance is wrong, somehow." Marcus opened his eyes, the Worldzinger's perception immediately expanding to encompass the ship's sensor array. What he felt made him gasp in shock and revulsion. Where Kepler 442b should have registered as a living world with the complex harmonics of an active biosphere, instead there was something like a screaming discord that seemed to assault the very concept of organized matter. "They're still there," he said, struggling to process what the weapon was showing him. "The Void Singers. And they're singing." Through the viewports of the meditation chamber, the star Kepler 442 appeared normal enough. But as they dropped out of hyperspace and approached the fourth planet, the wrongness became visible to ordinary human senses. The world's surface, which should have been the blue-green of a terraformed colony, was now a shifting pattern of grays and blacks that seemed to move with unnatural purpose. "My God," Captain Chen whispered, staring at the planet through the viewport. What do they do to it? They're using the colonists as amplifiers, Zara said, her voice tight with horror. 12,000 human minds, all singing the song of entropy in perfect harmony. The entire planet has become a single massive void singer instrument. Marcus felt the Worldzinger responding to the proximity of its ancient enemy, its crystalline structure beginning to resonate with harmonics that made the air itself seem to thicken. Through its perception, he could sense individual human consciousness patterns embedded in the planetary discord. Still there, still technically alive, but wrapped in layers of alien thought that threatened to drown out everything that had once made them human. Can we save them? Captain Chen asked. Maybe, Marcus replied, standing and moving toward the viewport. But we're going to need to get close enough to touch the planetary resonance with the Worldzinger. Very close. How close? Atmospheric entry close. Captain Chen paled slightly. Sir, if those people have been converted into void singers, approaching the planet could be suicide. Our ship's crystalline systems will be vulnerable to their harmonic attacks. Then, we'll have to trust that the Worldzinger can protect us, Marcus replied, though privately he wasn't entirely sure that was possible. The sheer scale of what the void singers had accomplished on Kepler 442b was beyond anything in the historical record Zara had shown him. The approach to the planet took 3 hours, with the Harmony's crew working frantically to shield their systems against the increasingly powerful waves of discord emanating from the surface. By the time they reached the outer atmosphere, the ship's crystalline components were beginning to resonate with painful harmonics that made everyone aboard feel nauseated and disoriented. Marcus stood on the bridge with the Worldzinger in his hands, trying to maintain a protective harmonic field around the ship, while simultaneously analyzing the complex web of corrupted consciousness patterns below. What he found was both better and worse than he'd expected. They're still human, he reported to Captain Shun and Zura. The core consciousness patterns are intact, just buried under layers of void singer programming. But the programming is integrated at the neural level. Trying to remove it by force could destroy their minds entirely. So what do we do? Captain Chen asked. Marcus thought about his years in the archives, about the careful patience required to restore damaged manuscripts without destroying the original text. We remind them who they are, he said finally. We sing them a song they remember from before the corruption. He closed his eyes and let the Worldzinger's consciousness merge fully with his own. The sensation was overwhelming. Suddenly, he could perceive not just the 12,000 human minds trapped in the Void Singer Collective, but every harmonic resonance on the planet, from the atomic vibrations of the crystalline deposits to the subtle electromagnetic patterns that governed weather and geology. The Void Singer's song was a masterpiece of destructive harmony, a carefully orchestrated symphony of entropy that turned the planet's natural resonances against themselves. But underneath it, Marcus could still detect the faint echoes of human consciousness, like a melody half-remembered from childhood. He began to hum, starting with the same simple tune his grandmother had taught him years ago, the one about morning light and growing flowers that had first activated the Worldzinger at New Geneva Station. The weapon amplified his voice and sent it down through the atmosphere, weaving between the chaotic harmonics of the Void Singer Collective. The response was immediate and violent. The planetary discord shifted, focusing on his position like a weapon designed to shatter reality itself. The harmony shields flared as waves of destructive resonance struck the ship, and several crew members collapsed as the hostile harmonics overwhelmed their nervous systems. But Marcus kept singing, adding complexity to his simple melody, weaving in harmonics that he'd learned from Zara and techniques that the Worldzinger itself seemed to suggest. Slowly, carefully, he began to separate the human consciousness patterns from their void singer programming, like untangling a knot that had been tied with living thought. One by one, the human minds began to respond to his song. A mining engineer named David Patterson was the first to break free, his consciousness suddenly blazing with familiar human patterns of curiosity and determination. Then a research scientist, Dr. Maria Santos, followed by a teacher named Jennifer Liu, who had been running the colony's school. Each freed mind became an amplifier for Marcus's song, adding their own harmonic patterns to his melody and helping to reach others who were still trapped. The process was exhausting, like trying to perform surgery on 12,000 patients simultaneously while under constant attack from an enemy that literally weaponized chaos. But it was working. The gray-black patterns on the planet's surface began to shift and break apart as more human minds reclaimed their individual identities. The Void Singer Collective, dependent on the harmony of corrupted consciousness, began to lose cohesion as its unwilling members remembered what it meant to think for themselves. That was when the real Void Singers revealed themselves. Marcus had been assuming that the corrupted colonists were the enemy, but as the humans broke free from their programming, he suddenly sensed something else on the planet, a core group of perhaps 50 minds that were fundamentally different from anything he'd encountered before. These were not converted humans or even corrupted Zephyrians. These were something altogether alien, consciousness patterns that seemed to exist in the spaces between thoughts, feeding on discord and chaos like parasites. The original Void Singers. Zara gasped, her skin patterns flickering with alarm as she sensed them through her connection to Marcus and the World Zinger. Marcus, those are not beings that can be reasoned with or converted. They are entropy given consciousness, destruction given will. The true Void Singers struck back with everything they had, sending waves of pure chaos that threatened to shatter not just the World Zinger, but the very concept of organized matter within a light-year radius. Marcus felt the ancient weapon straining under the assault, its crystalline structure beginning to resonate with dangerous frequencies. But he also felt something else. The 12,000 human minds he'd freed from corruption, all of them now singing his grandmother's simple melody in perfect harmony. Their combined will, their shared determination to remain human in the face of entropy itself, created a harmonic resonance that the Void Singers could not corrupt or destroy. Together, the humans and the World Zinger sang a song of creation, of growth, of the stubborn persistence of life in an uncaring universe. They sang about libraries and gardens, about children learning to read and farmers planting crops, about all the small, quiet acts of hope that kept civilization alive. The Void Singers screamed their discord in response, but their chaos could find no purchase on a melody that was fundamentally about the things that made existence worth preserving. One by one, their alien consciousness patterns began to collapse, unable to maintain coherence in the face of such perfect, unified harmony. When the song finally ended, Kepler 442b was quiet for the first time in 3 days. The planet's surface was scarred and would take years to fully recover, but the blue-green patterns of a living world were already beginning to reassert themselves. 12,000 human beings stood on the surface below, confused and traumatized, but fundamentally, recognizably human. Marcus collapsed onto the bridge of the Harmony, the World Zinger clattering onto the deck beside him. Every muscle in his body ached, and he felt like he'd been awake for a week. "Is it over?" Captain Chen asked. "For now," Zara replied, carefully retrieving the ancient weapon. "But word of this victory will spread. Other species will learn that humanity now holds the power to counter the Void Singers. That will change everything in the galaxy." Marcus managed to sit up, accepting the cup of water that someone handed him. "Good or bad change?" "That," Zara said with a small smile, "will depend on what we do next 2 years after the liberation of Kepler." 442b, Marcus stood in the center of the great assembly hall on Galactic Council Station, holding the World Zinger, while representatives from 43 different species watched in tense silence. The weapon had changed over the months since their first victory against the Void Singers, its crystalline structure now showing faint patterns of silver and gold that seemed to shift in response to Marcus's emotional state. The hall itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a vast crystalline dome that could accommodate the environmental needs of species ranging from the aquatic Delphari to the silicon-based litharks. Each delegation sat in specialized environmental pods that allowed them to participate in discussions despite requiring radically different atmospheres, temperatures, and pressure levels. At the center of the debate was the question that had dominated galactic politics for the past year: what to do about humanity's new role as guardians of the Worldzinger. The bearer has proven his ability to counter the Void Singer threat, Ambassador Lyralii was saying, her crystalline form catching the artificial starlight that streamed through the dome. But the power he wields affects every species in the galaxy. We cannot simply trust that human wisdom will guide such terrible capabilities. Admiral Harrison, representing Earth's interests, stood to respond. With respect, Ambassador, the human bearer has used the Worldzinger exactly 3 times in 2 years. Each time, it was to protect civilian populations from Void Singer attacks. We have made no aggressive moves, claimed no new territory, and demanded no tribute or special treatment. Yet, interjected Counselor Vexhai of the Crothery hegemony, his words accompanied by the sulfurous fumes that indicated extreme agitation among his species. The mere existence of such power in human hands changes the balance of everything. What assurance do we have that future generations will be so restrained? Marcus had been listening to variations of this argument for 6 months now, ever since the Council had convened this special session to address the human situation. The irony wasn't lost on him that most of these species have been engaged in various forms of warfare, territorial expansion, and political manipulation for centuries, yet they were concerned about humanity's responsible use of power. Zara, who now served as humanity's official cultural liaison to the Council, rose from her seat in the human delegation. "If I may speak to this concern," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that commanded attention from crystalline-based species. "The Worldzinger itself provides the greatest assurance of responsible use. It is not simply a weapon that can be wielded by anyone. It chooses its bearer, and it responds only to those who understand the true nature of harmony." "And what is that nature?" asked Elder Nixera of the Luminari Convergence, her form flickering with patterns of light that indicated genuine curiosity. Zara looked at Marcus, who nodded and stood, the Worldzinger humming softly in his hands. "Harmony," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic enhancement systems, "is not about forcing everyone to sing the same note. It's about understanding how different voices can work together to create something more beautiful than any single voice alone." He gestured to the assembled delegates, representing dozens of species with radically different physiologies, psychologies, and cultural values. The Void Singers believed that all resonance was corruption, that the universe would be better if everything was reduced to chaos. But they were wrong. The complexity, the diversity, the constant negotiation between different perspectives, that's not corruption. That's what makes life worth preserving. Marcus activated the Worldzinger's perception, allowing its consciousness to expand through the hall's crystalline structure. Suddenly, every delegate could feel what he felt, the incredible symphony of different life patterns, thought processes, and emotional resonances that filled the chamber. "Right now," Marcus continued, "I can sense the fear from some of you, the curiosity from others, the hope, the suspicion, the determination to protect your people. All of those responses are valid. All of them contribute to the conversation we're having. The Worldzinger doesn't want to silence any of those voices. It wants to help them find ways to harmonize." He turned to address Counselor Vexhai directly. "You're worried that humans might use this power to dominate other species. I understand that fear, because I've studied enough history to know how power corrupts. But the Worldzinger itself provides a safeguard against that corruption." "How so?" Vexhai asked, his suspicion evident in both his words and his scent. "Because it only responds to harmony, not domination," Marcus replied. "If I try to use it to force my will on others, to silence dissent or crush opposition, it would simply stop working. The weapon chooses its bearer based on their ability to create harmony, not enforce conformity." Elder Nixera's light patterns shifted to something that Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. This is a philosophical claim that sounds compelling, but how can we verify it empirically? Marcus looked around the hall, seeing the faces and environmental pods of beings from across the galaxy, all of them struggling with the same fundamental question that had plagued every civilization that ever developed powerful technology. How do you ensure that power serves life rather than destroying it? We test it, he said finally, together. Admiral Harrison leaned forward in his seat. What do you mean? Marcus turned to address the full assembly. The Worldzinger was originally created to counter the chaos that the Void Singers represent, but it's capable of much more than just warfare. It can enhance harmonic resonances, strengthen the connections between compatible technologies, even help different species understand each other more clearly. He gestured to the translation systems that allowed the dozens of species to communicate despite their radically different languages and thought patterns. What if we could improve those systems? What if the Worldzinger could help us develop better ways to share knowledge, coordinate research, respond to natural disasters? You're proposing to use an ancient weapon as a tool for cooperation? Ambassador Lyralii asked, her tone suggesting this idea was either brilliant or completely insane. I'm proposing to use an ancient tool of harmony for its original purpose, Marcus corrected. The Worldzinger was never meant to be a weapon in the conventional sense. It was meant to be a way of helping different peoples find common ground, literal harmony in a universe that tends toward chaos. Zara stood beside him, her skin patterns brightening with what he'd learned was excitement. Marcus is correct. The historical records are clear. The Worldzinger was created during a time when my ancestors were just beginning to encounter other spacefaring species. It was designed to facilitate communication and cooperation, not conquest. But would such cooperation be genuine? Asked Counselor Thekmore of the Sedini Republic. Or would it be artificial harmony imposed by the weapon's influence? Marcus thought about this question, which got to the heart of every ethical concern about the Worldzinger's power. There's only one way to find out, he said. We try it, but we do it together with full transparency and oversight from all interested parties. He turned to address the full assembly again. I propose a joint research project. Representatives from every interested species, working together to explore the constructive applications of harmonic resonance. The Worldzinger provides the power, but the wisdom comes from all of us working together. The hall fell silent as the delegates considered this proposal. Marcus could sense through the weapon's perception the complex web of calculations, concerns, and hopes that filled each environmental pod. Finally, Elder Nixera spoke. This proposal has merit, but it would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have been rivals for centuries. Then, maybe it's time to try something unprecedented, Marcus replied. The Void Singers showed us what happens when the forces of chaos go unchecked. But that doesn't mean we have to choose between chaos and tyranny. There has to be a third option, genuine cooperation based on mutual respect and shared benefits. Ambassador Lyralii stood, her crystalline form refracting the starlight in complex patterns that Marcus had learned indicated deep consideration. If we agree to this proposal, what safeguard would be in place to prevent misuse of the Worldzinger? Joint custody, Marcus said without hesitation. The weapon remains in my care because it chose me, but all research and applications are conducted under the oversight of a joint council. No species gets to dictate terms to the others, and every application of the Worldzinger's power must be approved by consensus. And if consensus cannot be reached, Counselor Vexhai asked, then we don't do it, Marcus replied simply. Better to move slowly and build genuine trust than to rush forward and create new conflicts. The debate continued for hours, with delegates raising concerns about security, sovereignty, economic implications, and the philosophical questions raised by technology that could influence consciousness itself. But gradually, Marcus sensed a shift in the harmonic patterns filling the hall, from suspicion and fear towards something that might eventually become hope. When a final vote was tallied, 31 species voted in favor of the joint research proposal, 8 voted against, and 4 abstained. It wasn't the unanimous consensus Marcus had hoped for, but it was enough to move forward. As the delegates filed out of the hall, making plans for the complex negotiations that would be required to establish the new cooperative framework, Zara approached Marcus with a smile that made her skin patterns dance with joy. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said softly. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the Worldzinger in his hands and the even greater weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I hope so. We're about to find out whether harmony is really possible on a galactic scale." "It won't be easy," Zara warned. "Some species will try to manipulate the process for their own benefit. Others will withdraw if they don't get their way. And the Void Singers are still out there. They won't simply accept this new order of cooperation." Marcus looked out through the dome at the star field beyond, where countless worlds harbored countless species, each trying to find their own way through the darkness. "Maybe that's okay," he said. "Maybe the point isn't to create a perfect system, but to create a system that can improve itself over time." He deactivated the Worldzinger's enhanced perception, returning to normal human senses. The sudden reduction in awareness was jarring, but also oddly comforting. Sometimes it was good to be reminded that he was still fundamentally human, still the same quiet librarian who had once thought his biggest challenge would be cataloging ancient texts. "Come on," he said to Zara, taking her hand as they walked toward the exit. "We have a lot of work to do, and I suspect this is just the beginning." Behind them, the great assembly hall fell silent, but Marcus could still feel the echoes of the conversation that had just taken place, the fragile beginning of something that might someday become true galactic harmony. It would take time, patience, and probably more than a few setbacks along the way. But for the first time since he'd held the Worldzinger, Marcus felt genuinely optimistic about the future. After all, the best songs were the ones that took time to develop, where different voices learned to complement each other through practice and patience. And if there was one thing his quiet life had taught him, it was that the most powerful changes often began with the simplest melodies.